The title of my research is Pinning Down the Past Ulster Brooches and Silver in Pre-Viking Ireland. On the top right there, that's the Ballyspellin brooch, a very characteristic penannular brooch of the Viking Age. Below that is this curious and huge brooch from the Ulster Museum in Belfast, made entirely of silver, that has slipped from the corpus of brooches catalogued in the Republic of Ireland. So what's the research topic? Put it simply, it's to investigate, examine and really uncover evidence of silver in a pre-Viking Irish economy. I understand that theses incorporate different elements of research and sort of package it into one, but also the avenue of some of this research could be to more carefully examine brooches that are currently on display in the National Museum Ireland in Belfast. And the reason for this research is, put it simply, the historiography up to now in the context of at least the dialogue and current theories regarding silver is that it was an innovation brought solely by the Vikings. So I'm just going to share a quote with Patrick Wallace, who was the director of the National Museum of Ireland. The Vikings who began to come to Ireland from Scandinavia in the late 8th century were apparently attracted initially by the wealth of the monasteries and the potential as centres for slave collection and sacred metalwork that could be converted to jewellery. This changed through time, however, and the Scandinavians began to bring large quantities of silver with them. This silver was utilised by native Irish silversmiths to produce exquisite jewellery. This is a little bit problematic. I'll put in italics the quote I'm trying to highlight because it assumes that there was no silver in Ireland before the Vikings. At least it wasn't used in economic terms, that's what it assumes. Perhaps it wasn't used at all. And this idea of silver solely coming from the Vikings is a sort of mode of thought that has persisted. And what's the problem here? The problem is research itself. For instance, in a paper by Ragnar O'Flynn, Michael Ryan, they write as follows: silver was in circulation in Ireland in the pre-Viking period, but the few analysis that we have suggests that it was not used in impurities as high as those of later times. And from typing into Google Scholar JSTOR silver Viking Ireland, there's very little discussion on the topic in and of itself. And this is echoed by other leading archaeologists, that there's a paucity of research, which will lead me into my next slide. Nancy Edwards, a very famous archaeologist, wrote a core textbook on the archaeology of early medieval Ireland. Once again, she reiterates what other scholars have said. With the coming of the Vikings, there was a great influx of imported silver, and silver objects became more common. But sources of silver in pre-Viking period are less well understood. Now, as an academic, I'm quite stubborn, and I suppose many students are when we're trying to find these unique paths of research, and I kept searching and searching and searching. I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole, if you will. I looked all over JSTOR, Google Scholar. I was also spurred on by Tyge O'Keefe's words during a lecture a number of years ago that an entire paper could spin off a single footnote. And this brings me to this very obscure book I found in the library out of pure chance, Studies of Early Ireland, Essays in Honour of M.V. Duggan. The paper is by Michael Ryan, Some Archaeological Comments on the Occurrence and Use of Silver in Pre-Viking Ireland. I typed the title into Google, nothing came back, so this really is an obscure paper. I won't summarise it entirely here, of course, but there's something really, really interesting here in terms of the insights. One is that there is good evidence of silver in pre-Viking Ireland, and two, that the historical sources back this up. Both sources, he argues, have actually been overlooked. Another comment worthy of note is the mention of a silver brooch from Ulster, and he writes as follows: in the period following the collapse of Roman administration in Britain, some small pieces of silver appear in Ireland. A penannular brooch from Lough, Faughan, County Down in the Ulster Museum. The ironic thing is, it is anything but small, it's massive. At the end, he also says it appears to the present writer that experimentation in the use of silver in pre-Viking Ireland was sufficiently far advanced to argue for regular supply and source of supply. So sufficiently advanced is the key there. It had to be coming from somewhere or somewhere reliably. So this is the brooch from County Down, Lough Faughan. Look at the size of it, it's absolutely enormous. If you're to look at the image on the bottom there, I mean head to head with other silver penannular brooches, it really is of a gargantuan size and proportions. In fact, it's 12 centimetres across and purely made of silver, and the date is what's most key. It reads in the index label, made between the 7th and 8th century, and there's therefore lots of questions can be asked here. It also received very little comment academically. In the book Anglo-Saxon and Irish Relations Before the Vikings, it received a mere footnote. The only thing we know about it, its background, is that it was found by an antiquarian, Reverend John Laverty, who described it as a silver fibula. Given that it's entirely composed of silver, this leads me to at least a few questions about this brooch. If it dates the 7th century, we're assumedly talking about a workshop producing silver objects at the very least. Slide 7. Questions, questions and more questions. The first question to ask is simply, if the Lough Faughan brooch is composed entirely of silver, where on earth is the silver coming from? Are any native silver sources being exploited in Ireland? Is it being mined in this period? What are the primary imported sources, if there are any? Are they late Roman stockpiles like you see down here in the corner with the huge Coleraine hoard from County Derry? This hoard was dated to the 5th century. It had 1,500 Roman silver coins and around 200 ounces of silver in lots of different forms. Some large, some small, ignates and hammered ignates and inscribed fragments. And if there is silver being imported, what quantities are they being imported to Ireland of? What other objects in archaeological record have been assessed for their silver content, such as the Tower brooch and the Moyloch shrine? Has anyone even assembled a corpus of pre-Viking silver? And importantly, any analysis on the silver composition itself, i.e. how much lead is contained within it? Other questions to be asked are the trade and economic relationships developing during this period, either from secular Viking ecclesiastical sources. Is silver imported because of close relations to Anglo-Saxon England? Do we even have any evidence for Irish Anglo-Saxon trade networks before 800? And recent publications suggest that we do. Tommaso Corrigan's work has also shown that the church have amassed considerable quantities of silver in the first half of the 9th century, i.e. 850 AD. Anglo-Saxon coins and silver ignates were found at Murdoch's Cross and Monaster Boyce in County Lough, a place traditionally associated with monasticism. So are there two distinct silver economies developing up to the year 850 AD? And are some of these... Sorry, skip past that, that's a typo. And some questions about silver in the Irish economy. Does silver have any credence, any effect, any weight in the pre-Viking Irish economy? Is silver mentioned in the large corpus of law tracts, and how frequently does the payment of silver appear compared to the payment of cattle, for instance? One important detail to note from Fergus Kelly's book, it's clear that the laws were all written from 600 to 800 AD, and in terms of one milch's cow value, i.e. a female cow bearing milk, it's equal to 1 ounce of silver. So, is there any evidence of fluctuation or circulation of silver in this economy, and it has at least been written about or legislated in the writings of the early Irish lawyers? In terms of data collection, this is really important. A complete catalogue of all pre-Viking Irish silver finds from Ireland, both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. X-ray fluorescence and lead isotope analysis of silver composition from Lough, Faughan and other artefacts. This would prove to be very difficult as the analysis on many items is lacking. Published and unpublished reports on silver hoards, including Coleraine, Monaster Boyce. In terms of historical textual data, a complete survey of silver references from the Old Irish law tracts. This will be gathered from the Corpus Iernus Hibernici. Anglo-Saxon documentary evidence of Irish trade, and as well any analytic, hagiographic, literary references to silver payments, tribute, or any transactions that would be contained in the Clavis Litterum Hibernicum by Donica O'Coran.